Automation tools like n8n are wiring your company's data and infrastructure together, and most people don't even test it for path traversals. You can either keep your company's infrastructure well together and combined, or ruin it for you altogether. It is important to know that you need to understand n8n automation and how it works, and not just put it in your website. And it is also important to update it as the newer version come by. So before we start, we need to know what n8n even is used for. For my non-technical viewers, n8n is basically an open source platform that automates repetitive or recurring tasks. For example, it can automate password reset requests when you forget your password, or send an email containing a verification code. It is important to know it only automates the workflow process. It is important to know that n8n platform is commonly deployed in three primary configurations. First being the self-hosted instance. It is when organizations deploy n8n on their premises or in a private cloud environment for full control. Second is cloud hosted. Now, in the cloud hosted, the service is managed with a shared infrastructure. Now, the third being internal automation tool. It is deployed within a corporate network to automate business processes between internal and external systems. Now that we know what n8n is and how it works, we will talk about two of its CVEs. The CVE 2025 works on the versions 0.211 till 1.120, and the CVE 2026 works on the version prior to the 2.101, 2.93, and 1.123. We will talk about what they can do and how they are cost. So for the first, let's talk about CVE 2025. The CVSS score for this is 9.9, and it affects the n8n automation. So before we start, we need to understand what it is. We need to understand that n8n lets us use the dynamic data in a workflow node with the use of double curly brackets, which n8n evaluates as a JavaScript at runtime. The engine sandbox around this evaluation didn't properly isolate execution from the underlying Node.js in the runtime. Talking about the root cause of this, it is basically improper control of dynamic managed cloud resources. The system trusted that authenticated user were safe and assumed the JavaScript sandbox was alright. While it wasn't, injected expression could escape the sandbox and reach the Node.js global scope, letting an attacker run arbitrary JS or JS payloads in the backend. Now, for the exploitation, it doesn't require much. You don't need a root access of a web server. It requires only low privilege authentication access with workflow credit or edit permission. The injection code simply inherits whatever the privilege the n8n process itself run as. So the damage ceiling depends entirely on how n8n was deployed. The damage will be worse if it's ran as root. There exists a lab in Hack the Box that you can visit to understand to exploit this. It is chained with another vulnerability, uh, which you can see in the screenshot right on the screen. So if you want to learn more about this vulnerability, you should definitely check out this lab in Hack the Box. The second CVE being is CVE 2026. With a CVS score of 9.0, uh, it is again related to n8n automation. Again, before we start with it, what is this vulnerability? A bug in the n8n's form nodes that lets an attacker inject malicious code through a public form field. No login is needed for this, like the previous one. That's why it is called a second order, because the injection and the execution happen at a different time. The bad data is submitted first and the evaluation is done later. Now, for the root cause, what are the root causes of this? n8n trusts the data coming from a form submission and lets it flow into the expression field without sanitization or filtration. If the form field's value starts with the sign of equal, n8n treats this as an expression and evaluates it, even if it comes from the random stranger from the internet. Now, how is it exploited? n8n needs a form node where the attacker's input gets shown back or reused somewhere n8n evaluates the expression. On its own, this gets you arbitrary expression evaluation, not full RCE yet. To turn it into the actual code execution, it needs to be chained with a sandbox escape bug like CVE 2025 68613 or something similar, one from the same disclosure batch. Now, we need to understand why this is also quite serious. It is fully unauthenticated and n8n is used by 230,000 organization plus. It stores real credentials like AWS key, TBS passwords, API tokens. Researchers found tens of thousands of exposed n8n forms on the internet. So the attack surface is real and not theoretical. It affects the version 1.1 to 3.22 and 2.93 and the version 2.10.1. Sadly, I could not find a proper room or lab in Try Hack Me or Hack the Box for this CVE, this specific CVE or even chain. And if you want to really test it out, maybe you can set up your own n8n automation on your um, home labs, and then you can test it over there with your own stuff in a safe environment. My next video is going to be about the previous CVE that we started, CVE 2025, the exploitation of a lab called blood flow.